Everybody will take their seats, please. We need to start this work session. We have an hour on this work session. It deals with the 2040 land use plan. Let's go around the table and identify ourselves for the record. Chris, we'll start. I know you got pizza in your mouth, but let's start with you.
Forrest Dunbar.
John Weddleton.
Felix Rivera.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Dick Trainee.
Eric Kraut. Good to see you.
Pete Peterson. Dyson.
Okay. Who's presenting from the administration?
Hi.
Okay, good. Good to see you.
Great. So I'm Hal Hart. I'm the planning director working for Chris. We're going to introduce, we're going to spend a little bit, I'll make a couple of introductory comments, kind of take you through what is in front of you. There'll be a presentation behind me. So again, I'm Hal Hart. We're excited to present Anchorage 2020 plan. There's a ton of work that's gone into this.
2040, Chris.
20, sorry.
Okay. You said 2020. It's 2040. It's been updated. I know we're so used to using 2020.
Thank you. The core team here, if they would stand or at least raise their hand, is Tom Davis, and John Cecil here, Jody Seitz, Steve Kovish, and our manager, Carol Wong. So these folks are completely dedicated. I have to chase them out at night because they work so hard. But they really believe in outreach to the community, and it's been excellent. The work and contributions of the broader team, though, beyond the team I just pointed out, is really what's behind the information that we're presenting. PM&E, lands, records, our GIS group. Bill Reed was a consultant with us with Pacific Northwest Economics to help us out on commercial and industrial land analysis. Also, Tina Miller and our GIS team, we got a really great graphic to show you about how that all links together with the data. Various GIS contractors have helped us. Barrett Studio Architects was also involved in assisting us. The development of the community-based plan engaged other agencies, many discussions with DOT, for example, private partners, affected community councils, and members of the public. We thanked all those in the many neighborhoods that we talked to for their time and great thoughts to shape this plan. The Muni and its enterprise departments, parks, real estate, traffic engineering, many long hours talking about many components of how does land use and transportation, how is it going to work together. AMAS, thinking regionally, people mover, how are we going to support new transit, and how does the next 20-year look support transit, big issue. Development services, everybody on the front counter, ACDA, AWWU, thinking of utilities planning, we went out and we looked at the sites. Are those sites capable of handling the load and the growth and working with them in the field? Other agencies and utilities, PLO, TSAIA, UAA, of course, University is a big component of growth and driving growth, True Dash Electric, and JBear. The Planning and Zoning Commission devoted 14 meetings to this. They think that the next 20 years is pivotal for the city, and they have made extensive comments and revisions, which are in front here today. So I and the team look forward to working with you as we bring this forward. Let's go to slide 2. We know that. So the 2020 plan is 20 years old at this point, and it's really the question is why are we doing this? So it's beyond just the aging of it. Land use plan map is 35 years old. It does not reflect the changes that have occurred on the ground, such as new development and rezones. We have a new forecast for population employment that needs to be addressed. We need to attract new development and reinvestment in our city building as our city builds. We have developers that are very interested in Anchorage and want to see the plan approved. They're asking me, where is the plan in this process? Last night I had a great discussion with a planner that's starting to invest in Alaska, and he wants to know if they're watching this because it gives predictability to the future. And they then get to see the blueprint. We need to ensure that predictability and that adequate supply of land for key industries is available to point to it, and also help all our economic anchors. So the time is now. The blueprint is in front of you. We're here to help you, walk you through it, and answer any questions that you have. So I will get off the stage and let somebody else take care of it.
Thanks, Adam.
Carol, everybody should have a copy of the PowerPoint in front of you, and they also gave you large-scale maps.
So we should be on PowerPoint, which is the next slide. But while John's helping us fix this, I just want to say thank you to all of you for this opportunity to brief you on the 2040 land use plan. Some of you may have questions about this plan, and we would ask that you hold that for the portion of the agenda that we've reserved for questions. But if there's a point of clarification during our presentation that is needed, please feel free to raise that. And then also, there is a second work session planned for later this month on September 22nd. So if we don't get to all your questions today, we will certainly do so by that time. So what is the Anchorage 2040 land use plan? It will be part of the municipality's comprehensive plan, and it is required by our charter. It is a targeted amendment to the 2020 plan and supplements that plan with new policies in which to guide where and how the goal should grow to meet the forecasted population and housing needs. And also, this plan will help our city become more resilient during these challenging times. The plan includes a new land use plan map, which will serve as a blueprint to guide growth and development. And it also includes an action section in our plan, which recommends actions, potential partners, as well as a time frame to advance the goals of this plan. Slide 3. Great, thank you. Anchorage 2020 land use policy. Yes, indeed. Thank you. So 2020 was a high growth plan. It projected 360,000 people here in Anchorage by 2020. We're nowhere near that. And so we had the projections of 2020 way overestimated the population. And how did 2020 address fitting those folks into the goal? By having more development in our centers, infill housing near our jobs, and by doing those two things, we could better preserve lower intensities elsewhere in the goal. 2040 is much more conservative growth plan just because of where we are economically, where we are in our growth projections. But it still builds on the 2020 approach for accommodating growth in the goal. So even though 2020 was a high growth plan, that 367,000 projection, we're taking that forward, we're seeing that maybe in the next 20 years that growth could occur, and the 2040 plan hits that growth still within the goal. Vision, plan, and action. So again, how are we moving this forward? The 2020 plan had a policy map. It gave us general locations for centers of growth, employment centers, as well as major transportation routes. The 2020 plan, what we've included is a more defined land use plan that provides greater detail of how that growth is going to happen in the goal. But I also want to point out that the 2040 plan recognizes what has been done through many of our neighborhood and district plans. So using this more specific land use plan map will help guide future zoning decisions that will be made by the Assembly. So, in the intervening years of since 2001 and now, many neighborhoods have adopted therapy plan, now new neighborhood plan, and this plan 2020 respects that and incorporates many of those area-specific plans and what those plans really desire for their community. And also for the first time, this plan pulls together all these plans into one place because we need to look at some of the services that the city provides that crosses neighborhood boundaries, such as transportation, transit, utilities, and other services that don't just stay in the neighborhood. And sometimes zoning crosses between one neighborhood and the next. So what does this plan do? This plan establishes, again, a blueprint for our future development and guides land use investment and zoning decision. It does respect what's been done in our neighborhood and district plans. This is a comprehensive plan, and it is a living document, so it's not set in stone. It is open to be amended in the future to respond to trends and needs. What it doesn't do is, this plan upon adoption does not change the permitted uses for rules that govern property. It does not change zoning at the date that you adopt this plan. Those processes happen in the future by individual property owners when they think they choose to rezone our property time. Or as one of the actions in our plan suggests is targeted area rezones, where the city goes into key areas where we have heard is ready for redevelopment. There's support by the community or that neighborhood to see growth, where we can use our zoning, targeted area zoning, to go in there and spur development. So lastly, this plan does set the stage. It sets the stage for us to move forward. We're living in uncertain times and challenges, and that the city needs to provide a message of assurance to our community and investors. The 2040 plan is that message. And it tells how we as a city intend to respond to change, how we will use our limited resources to foster growth and development. And the plan provides a message of where we're going over the next 25 years. And to those who are looking to live, work, play, and certainly to invest in ourselves. So this plan creates greater certainty through its review and use of data. And it informed us about the past and where we're going in the future. And to talk about our data is data-driven data, as we call him, Tom, to move us into the next group. So thank you.
One of the first things that happened to the team when we hit the streets was we started getting a lot of questions about how much growth are we trying to accommodate and how much housing can we accommodate? Why are we doing this? So in order to answer those questions, we had to combine a lot of information about demographic trends, land use trends, and other sources. And we, with the help of a variety of agencies, developed about 30 story maps and some analyses about our current buildable land base, our housing trends and housing stock, ownership patterns, where our sewer and water and streets can handle growth, our plans that exist, and then the types of neighborhoods we have. This is just several of the maps and layers that we use in order to come together and create a land use plan map. In the past 5 years or so, there have been 3 major land studies that have the benefit of a local advisory committee, groups of local developers and land use specialists, housing builders, brokers, for our housing, our commercial and industrial land needs. Those studies projected across the board deficits. What we've done with the land use plan map is, with consultant Bill Reed, who helped develop the commercial and industrial land studies, we've updated and projected out using the same methods to the year 2040. We've also updated our lands database and land use information. So we've updated the demand side and the supply side. And Appendix B of the land use plan map is the sum of those forecasts. It basically reconfirms what these other studies have projected for the municipality. Under current building patterns, under current, how much do we typically get on a commercial lot? How much do we typically get on an R3 zone lot when we build a family? Their current trends and land use patterns continue forward. We have a vacant land base that's not capable of handling the housing and jobs, businesses that we see coming. Anchorage is designed to accommodate its share of growth for the region in the land use plan map. When we project future growth, there are expectations about what share of growth will come to the municipality, and within the municipality, what share comes to the bowl. We left no stone unturned. When we looked for additional opportunities to grow our urban development area, we looked at the areas with the remaining land supply within the municipality. We also looked at what the Madison Borough is likely to accommodate between 2015 and 2040. In general, what we found is that these land areas are generally either not available, or their availability with urban infrastructure, the streets and the water that will support urban development there, the timing is uncertain. Access to some of these areas is not within our control. So we do not want to hang our hat on being able to expand into areas that we can't count on. Chugiak Eagle River has its own plan and its own land use plan map. The Chugiak Eagle River Comprehensive Plan Update 2005 is a very strong plan. It had its own advisory committee, had its own process. The team that created it, the planning department, lived out there. Chugiak Eagle River planned to have, at the end of the day, the end of its planning horizon, about 15% of the municipality's population. And both the Chugiak Eagle River Plan and Anchorage 2024 imagined a higher growth rate than today. We are respecting and carrying forward that ratio. And so we don't expect Chugiak Eagle River or some other place to solve the bull's challenges in accommodating the growth that should come to Anchorage. With Bill Reed's help, we developed a number of scenarios for growth. We can't predict the future, but what we can do is we can plan for a scenario that provides for moderate but healthy rate of growth for a population and employment, and accommodate that scenario for success, basically. The range of most likely scenarios for how fast Anchorage is going to grow is basically shown here in this gray area. From 2015 to 2040, we have a low growth base case and a high growth shown here. What we're planning for is the highest among the most likely scenarios. In other words, we want Anchorage to be able to accommodate up to 47,000 more residents in the bowl at this point here. Overall municipality would reach this population. We want to prepare ourselves to be able to accommodate up to 44,000 additional jobs by 2040 in the bowl. The main goal here is to avoid the policy pitfall where we expect too little, we plan for less, and we make those land shortages, housing prices worse. So we're basically a little under 1% growth with 0.9% average annual growth rate. This updated in 2016, taking into account the current no growth situation in the municipality, and then projecting out to 2040. Looking forward, who are we planning for? And what type of housing do we anticipate the current residents in Anchorage Bowl desire to be able to afford? What kind of places do they live in? So we look at what types of housing the population we expect to live in. And in this diagram, ranging from the very lowest amount of housing per acre, this is a hillside house, Anchorage hillside, up through single family, compact single family, including small lot housing, accessory grandmother units, getting up to 2-family and townhouse, and then up to the stacked apartments, either apartment building or some of these newer mixed-use building concepts. So in the middle here, the middle is the compact housing types. These are small scale, so to speak, but a big deal for our future growth in terms of fitting housing into neighborhoods, keeping neighborhood character, but also providing affordable housing for a population. We, under current zoning, under current trends, we do nothing. Current development patterns continue. Our residential vacant land base can accommodate about 9,700 additional housing units. Our forecast housing demand, based on that 47,000 additional residents, taking into account household size, those of us who live in dwelling units, is a little under 21,000 additional needed housing units, according to that low, moderate, base case growth scenario. The highest deficits in terms of, if we continue our current trends, 1/3 of housing being occupied in single-family homes, we have severe deficits for single-family housing, for vacant land supply in the bowl, and then some land supply housing capacity deficits for our more compact housing types, particularly for the 2-family and then multifamily. Current trends patterns continue. I'm going to generalize the numbers here. We have a land capacity of 9,700 future additional dwelling units are residentially zoned vacant land. So if you think of residential land as our zone land, a vacant lot, has no building on it. What can we get out of it? But we also know that we're going to have some redevelopment. And part of our study was to look at what's been our track record for how much housing we redevelop. When you have a lot with a little house on it, swipe the house, build more units on it, that's redevelopment. I apologize here. This 2,500 is up here. I switched this at the last minute. I forgot to switch my number. So if you are looking at your copy, you might slash that 700 and make it 2,500. And the 700 goes with commercially zoned land. Sorry about that. So why only 700 units in commercial? We have a lot of commercial land. We have a lot of potential there. But what happens under current trends is that, for a variety of reasons, commercial lots tend to develop without housing. There's a lot of reasons why, but they develop with the stores and the offices. So we expect very little under current trends out of our commercial lands. On the employment side, we're looking at area-specific deficits in our commercial land supply compared to commercial land use. About 740 acres of land for office, commercial office, for institutional, retail, lodging, and then a more severe deficit of land for our available industrial lands. And we first learned this for our industrial land study in 2015. And the big question coming back to us from the Planning and Zoning Commission was, so what? You know, why do we need industrial land, more room for storage? Actually, it was the Assembly that asked us to go back and look at what are our most important sectors of our economy that essentially bring home the bacon for Anchorage, that are our export, higher wage sectors. Those tend to be concentrated in the certain industrial uses like manufacturing, surprising amount in the bowl. Also, office, professional office, and technical. So there's a lot of industrial uses behind what makes our economy, what drives our economy. The difference between industrial and commercial in general is that when you have like this beverage manufacturer here on King Street, you have trouble building up the multiple stories. It's harder for industrial to resolve for its land supply problem by building up than it is for commercial. This is an industrial building, but only the first floor has the industrial space. The offices take the top 2 floors. So we have a more severe shortage on the industrial side. We have a lot of information that drives this plan that we're attempting to accommodate this growth. But another really important piece of information that shaped this plan is the input from the variety of people, organizations out in the community. And here to talk to you about what that meant for this plan is Mr. Lee Tobish. So I'll pass the vote.
Thanks, Tom. So the last time we briefed you, I think we were still in the midst of our public process. So we wanted to give you some highlights from that lengthy process for the past couple of years. So Tom gave you the information that the plan is based on data, responds to data and demographics. But equally essential to the foundation of the plan is the public input. Armed with the data that Tom highlighted here, the planning team went out and engaged the community with a fairly aggressive public involvement process. And the bottom of your graphic there shows a sort of a cartoon version that summarizes the key points. The planning team participated in over 150 consultations, especially at the front end of the project, with roughly 110 stakeholder groups. You can see some summaries there. There are two main key milestone products from the public process. Both involved the release of draft plans. The first half of 2016 was the community discussion draft. It included 15 public meetings and 2 or 3 additional focus groups. And the findings and events from that process fed into the public hearing draft plan, which was released roughly a year ago to this week. That process included an additional 2 public hearings and 3 additional focus groups on the data. The first half of the process is highlighted in a document I think Tom may have. It's called the 500-page planning documentation, public process documentation. I think it's important to note that it was the express goal of the planning team throughout the process that we listened to, heard, and understood and responded to the public input throughout the 2 years of the program. So the next slide, I'm going to give you some more detail. The next slide focuses on here's the 500 pages of documentation. Please don't ask us for copies. So the second half of the process focused on the public hearing draft, and the public comments are compiled in Appendix F, which we can give you a hard copy of if you need one, but it's online right now. It's entitled the
comment issue response document. This 320-page compendium pairs public input issues, staff issues and responses, some of which are very long-winded, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations and findings. It highlights upwards of 210 issues, specific issues, from 99 respondents over a 6-week public process. 154 out of those 210 or so issues led to specific changes and plan upgrades that went to the commission for their deliberation. And here's an example in your slide, maybe you can see it in front of you. This is just the format of our issue response, showing the issue on one side, staff issue response and recommendations, and the Planning and Zoning Commission findings and action. So this plan is, this document was the basis of the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations to you, and all of their findings are now embedded in the document you've received for approval next couple of weeks. I wanted to make clear that the Planning and Zoning Commission did an incredible amount of work over 14 meetings between October and June of this year. And they had to balance the public input with a staff recommendation, with existing plan policies, and with the fiscal constraints and land constraints that we're under right now. So they're to be commended for their incredible amount of work for you to work with. The next few slides, Tom's going to talk more about some specific most heard issues from the public in more detail. And I have copies of our public involvement plan summary if you'd like. Just let me know. First, the public wanted to know how much housing does the land use plan accommodate? Does it resolve the problem? It resolves the housing gap for most housing types. And overall, it squeaks by with providing slightly more housing units than projected demand. It does so in a number of ways. It, first of all, increases the rate of redevelopment and recommends actions that yield us more compact housing. It also does a few other things on your slide. I wanted to focus on the compact housing types and the single family. It doesn't quite resolve those challenges. It takes strides towards each. The land use plan map satisfies the commercial land demand in providing more space than projected supply. It's a good place to be. If you want more space, you want more housing in your supply than your projected demand. One of the best ways it does that is by encouraging more what we call compact, efficient use of land. But here's the evidence of it. Basically, a 10 to 20% increase in efficiency. So when you build, you get 10% more floor space on your lot. How is that possible? There's a variety of strategies in the plan for that. But it actually decreases the amount of acreage needed to accommodate the employment demand for the office, retail, lodging, or commercial. The chart shows the variety of lands that make this possible for each. It narrows the industrial gap. It has to consolidate the remaining industrial land supply. It removes some industrial lands that are thought no longer well-suited position to accommodate industrial, but it adds other lands elsewhere. It doesn't quite resolve the gap. The other question about the growth is, well, is it in my neighborhood? Where is the growth occurring? This is map 1-2. It is on page 19 of your plan. It is a diagram that reflects relative amounts of growth, where they occur in the bold. And along with that are the factors that we use in consultation with the community about where are the most likely areas to grow. A lot of this is already where current zoning and trends are leading growth. And a lot of it has to do with where we believe we have the capacity to handle growth, and also where we see the most support in our adopted neighborhood district land use plan, Anchorage 2020 for growth, and where we see growth having fewer negative impacts. What does this look like? For the commercial lands, I think the most extreme example of a redevelopment is does anybody remember Big Boy Restaurant? Big old plastic Big Boy right here. Well, Big Boy Restaurant had a nice big parking lot around it. In place of Big Boy, we have an example of redevelopment at the high end of the range. In the more medium, low end of the range, we take that Big Boy or that other small building, and we have stories of office on top of the retail, or we have stories of residential on top of the retail, using a variety of strategies to make our commercial lands soak up a lot of that growth. We have a lot of free land in the form of parking lots and other underutilized spaces. Where does that occur on the land use plan map? Well, I would say that if you look at the left side of your legend, and you look down this row, I would say that the bottom 10 or so colors. These colors here are where we tend to look at opportunities to provide for infill and redevelopment. Infill can happen in the form of a vacant lot going to this duplex, like recently happened near Cordova, near Fairview in South Edition. It can happen on a larger scale, like here on 16th. It also can occur in forms that encourage compact development. This is a great example. It's actually in downtown Eagle River, but it's a great example for Anchorage to follow. A two-story office services building up to the street. And even in our commercial corridors, this is a strip mall. It's up against the street. The parking's beside it, and it has a drive-through. So even that form of strip mall, like Pizza Amarillo strip mall, can be a part of providing for growth, reuse, and expansion of existing buildings. How much growth does this accommodate? Where is it accommodating? Is it in my neighborhood? The other major issue that we were confronted with is two sides of a coin, the yin and the yang. From one side of the community, we have a lot of demand to make it easier to develop housing, infill and redevelop. We need to make changes at the way the municipality processes and allows housing. We need to make it easier to do these kinds of housing types that we like. But on the other side are a lot of the neighborhoods. So we all live in neighborhoods, and we cherish the neighborhoods we live in and what they provide. But what's happening is more and more of the development that occurs in Anchorage is occurring within existing neighborhoods. So it's becoming more and more important for us to think about how that housing fits in terms of how big it is, how tall it is, how it relates to the street, whether it's a lane in a suburban environment or whether it's in a more urban environment here, and what are its other impacts. In fact, there are a lot of ways to provide a lot of housing. For example, this is 3 units. It looks like a duplex, but there's an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And Cook Inlet Housing just pulled this off. This example shows even higher number of units per acre on a lot. You can have an accessory dwelling unit and several units in what we call a big house. Looks like a house in your neighborhood, but it might have several apartments. There are 4-plex and 6-plexes that don't get this much amount of housing per acre as these, but they fit in the neighborhood. That's what the neighborhoods are looking for. When we do go to the taller buildings, this example from Midtown Minneapolis shows how the apartment building provides over its own parking garage a step down, a couple of duplex-like units that step down to the existing neighboring single family. There are ways to make this work. Not all neighborhoods are the same. From Hillside to Southport to South Edition, we have a variety of different neighborhood forms. And one size fits all for how our housing will look and feel doesn't work. So we're looking at ways to make housing fit better in its context.
Tom, will I mess you up if I let a Assembly ask a question at this point? I've got one Assembly member needs to ask a question because you got to leave.
Yeah, it's
Chris?
jump the process, but I have to run out. I have just 3 quick questions. I think they're quick. It appears on the map that you've removed a layer, reinvestment focus area. Is that true, or has that been embedded some other way?
It's still there, and the reinvestment focus area is in the actions map. We have, John Cecil will cover that.
Okay, thank you. And then,
Still there.
that's good. And then the population assumption, Carol, you said this is a conservative map development plan because the numbers are lower. It seems like the numbers you're aiming for are the same numbers they aim for in the 2020 plan.
Right, so we're just taking, so what we thought we would have achieved in by 2020, we're just scooting it out, and we're still able to accommodate that growth,
Right.
even at a slower rate.
So just essentially it's the same target, just 20 years out. Okay, so 40 years to get there, maybe we get there. And then what does the word respect mean in the terms of neighborhood-specific plans and the land use plan map? The 2040 plan will respect the neighborhood plans. What does that mean?
For the most part, I would say that 95% of what came through in the neighborhood and district plan helped build this map. And where we had made adjustments were along transit corridors, within centers or near centers, to do some of the new housing types, to provide opportunities for the new housing types that Tom has mentioned.
The plan is really clear and straightforward of where it recommends departures from existing adopted plans. Here in our areas of growth map, there is a dark green outline of where it does. The plan is responding to new updated. Some of these plans are, getting older. Take Fairview's plan, for example. That's a more recent plan, and so there's really the land use plan map took the Fairview land use plan map and incorporated it in. And so it basically, the land use designations in the Fairview area and the land use plan, although they are a bit more generalized, because it's a more generalized map, they cross-reference right back to the Fairview. We looked at every plan like that.
Right, and our last question on that, and then I got around here.
You got to run, Chris.
Is the concept of that clearly stated in a table somewhere, the nature of the relationship of the neighborhood plans to the larger plan, and how future bodies should contemplate decisions? I don't know if I'm kind of speaking
Yes.
plain English here, but, right.
Yes, it does. And it does include a cross-reference table as well.
I understand the table, and that's a very great concession to the neighborhood's request, but is there language on how it should be interpreted? Right, and kind of hierarchy of order of what's
Yes.
important
Yeah.
in the review of a plan relative to the land use plan, the neighborhood plan, A, B, C, D are what's important. I don't know if that
I know what
makes
you're
sense.
getting at, and yes, there is language in the 2040 plan that shows the thought process when you look at a site, what you should be consulting to determine how that site is best used.
There's also a very informational graphic on page 4 of your plan that describes that visually for those of us like me who learn in pictures.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure I look real close at that.
Tom, you got about 12 minutes left.
And I'll be back in just, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to cut to the chase and go over to John Cecil. But before I do that, I want to leave you all with a couple of issues. I mentioned that the land use plan map doesn't quite resolve the housing need for certain housing types, including the compact housing types. Fairly states by their compact means small lot, single family cottage, accessory dwelling units, townhouses and duplex. It's barely getting there. One of the most common, still common compact housing types, we still do have 5,000 dwelling units in the mobile homes, in mobile home parks, 5,000. It's a constant ongoing pressure that we experience in planning. Applicants do often want to rezone or reclassify their residential land, often mobile home park or other redevelopable site, to a commercial use. And they can say, well, we are going to include mixed residential. The thing about a commercial zone, like I said before, very rarely do you get housing built in a B3 zone, because B3 doesn't require housing. So we have that continued pressure on our residential land supply.
Tom, we got some more questions for you.
Sorry, this
Forrest?
is a really quick question on that previous slide. Yeah. This is a very specific question. No, on 27. There's a rezone. So you got this like proposed rezone red dashed line there, just north of DeBar, just west of Boniface. Isn't that Russian Jack Park? I'm just curious. I guess I'm missing something, but it looks like a big square in Russian Jack Park.
Yes, you are correct. That is in Russian Jack Park. That square should be on the east side.
Okay. Just making sure we weren't turning
Sorry about that.
Russian Jack Park into condos.
Good catch.
Not there yet, but
Thank you, Forrest. Tom, you want to continue? You've got 10 minutes left, sir.
Squirrels are gonna be mad.
On the industrial side, we have a similar a challenge. So again, we don't quite close the gap on industrial. Industrial enterprises, they don't put all their resources into developing land. They put all their resources in all the machinery and the more skilled labor that they use to carry out business. They cannot compete with retail or office. And office and retail there are also often proposals to reclassify industrial to commercial. And it's still a bull-wide problem. In this area, South C Street, the land use plan does recommend reclassifying some areas that are poor soils, difficult and expensive to develop, and that are right near Target and Cabela's, from industrial to commercial. There are a number of strategies we try to mitigate that with, but that's still an issue. This slide attempts to show a gain in commercial. There's an increase in the gap of industrial. When we agree to change the color on the map for an applicant or for someone making a comment, we want to express to you that there are effects. And what we'd like to express is that when we do get those requests, that what we can do to help the assembly is to help inform you about the effects on the ledger of making a choice to reclassify a property from the industrial side of the ledger over to the commercial. And likewise, another animation that we can provide and elaborate on, we can show is a loss of maybe 2 mobile home parks in order to increase the commercial, and what that does to our housing gap. So the land use plan map is a finely balanced tool. It's like an orchestra. You lose one instrument, you lose some instruments, and it begins to sound badly. With that, I will turn over to John to complete the presentation about the action plan.
Yes, thank you. Given the shortage in time, we can offer the remaining portion that we have for your questions, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions, or we can hold off on, I can get through this very quickly, and how do you want to try it?
Why don't you get through this very quickly, and then we'll ask some questions the remaining time we've got.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, so in order to accomplish all the things that Tom and the other members of the team have just laid out here for you over the past 45 minutes, we've identified an action plan that is in this document that I hope you'll spend some time looking at. But in particular is the action plan on I had my tab. Anyway, at least a dozen actions that we can, wish we had more time to talk about. In order to accomplish those actions, we've identified a work plan essentially starting now, when the plan is adopted, and going through the next 4 or 5 years. And so obviously we can't accomplish all of the things that we'd like to see in this plan do. We've tried to pick and choose some of the higher priorities, the issues that will have the biggest bang for the buck, and then work through those remaining ones, subject to availability of staff, subject to availability of resources across the board. This is an illustrative slide of an issue we're calling a reinvestment focus area, which is an area where we would target particular resources. It would be partnership essentially between the muni, private development, property owners, willing property owners, and as a way to catalyze a particular area or neighborhood. So just one example. We have a web page. You're welcome to look at that. The last piece that I'll leave you with, and this comes back to, I think, the comments we heard earlier from someone from Stonewall. This is the actions map, where we try to identify where some of those particular areas are that we could catalyze development through a variety of different actions, use of the CIP, tax abatement, all of the tools that we have in the toolbox, and some new ones that we're proposing in the plan. So with that, I'll shut up and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
For questions.
Question from some of your members. Mr. Dyson, sir.
Thank you. Looks to be like a little bit,
Well, thank you.
appreciate it. I went through this looking for what you guys would say, and I consider to be de facto the armpit of in and around where the Brother Francis shelter in that whole area. And my friend Mr. Constant talked about the impact on the commercial investment along, I think, what you call Fairview. Please don't take my comment as denigrating the conservation plan. I was hoping that somebody's got a plan on what we should do to mitigate the impact. Can comment a little bit on how we should view, and perhaps you all, an area like that desperately needs to be different?
Okay, so one real quick answer is that Fairview does have its own neighborhood plan.
Right.
And it addresses many of the issues that you just talked about, areas of deterioration, potential blight, and what they would like to see, the things that they would like to see to improve that neighborhood, as well as the other neighborhood district plans have similar strategies as well for areas that they would like to see improved.
So the answer is, you guys didn't spend any more time rather than incorporating their plan, which was probably pretty good.
Well, that's short answer, yes, but we also consulted with those neighborhoods, the residents of those areas, and had many conversations about what their plan wants to do, what we're trying to do with this plan.
Mr. Dyson, the actions map, that map there at a small scale, this plan does, there it is, in that inset to the left of the focus.
Yeah, I saw
You'll
that.
see a high concentration of recommended actions, including new tools like the reinvestment focus area that include Fairview. So it not only respects, so to speak, the Fairview plan, it introduces new tools using the greater resources of the muni to help make that change in Fairview. So a reinvestment focus area.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Wilton, sir, final question.
If we have like specific comments on this, how would you like us to communicate with you? I mean, we
So,
just
Mr.
go with
Chair?
amendments at the Assembly meeting, that might not be very
So
It's gotta
through the
come to your
chair,
committee, John.
What would be really helpful is we have one more work session scheduled in 2 weeks from today, I believe. So what would be really helpful is outstanding comments or questions or potential amendments. If you'd like to leverage the resources of the planning department to help address those in the 2 weeks leading up to it. And then in that forum, we'd be able to provide answers, additional details, et cetera. We'd love to be at your disposal.
Okay, so email them to Hal?
Yeah.
John, I would expect your committee to deal with this too.
Sure, why not?
Well, you spent how many years on P and Z?
Well, I think I saw presentations on this 7 times in about 4 weeks.
You are the resident expert, sir.
2016, then I burned out, so I'm back.
You've been drafted. Any fellow comments from the same members before we end this meeting? This work session is now